Now let's do a summary of the three cases that we looked at, and just the conclusions for each of the cases and how they apply to Proposition One and Proposition Two. Now, you could argue that this model is very theoretical, and some of the cases have very unrealistic assumptions, but they were essentially just used as sort of building blocks. You start with case one, then you introduce taxes, then you introduce bankruptcy to see what happens. And Proposition 1 and Proposition 2 are value and cost of capital, respectively. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to maximize, or we're going to try to maximize the value of the firm and minimize the cost of capital. So in case one, where there is no taxes and it is impossible for the firm to go bankrupt, the um, impact of capital structure it doesn't exist. It's irrelevant. And the same for Proposition 2. So essentially what it's saying is it makes no difference how you finance a firm. The value of that firm will not change, and the cost of capital will not change. Doesn't seem realistic, but then it isn't because of the fact that the assumptions are not realistic. Taxes and bankruptcy are an important part of the business world. So now if we add taxes in and get to case two, and we still leave out bankruptcy, it becomes intuitive that at this point, if one of your sources of financing is cheaper and it has no consequences in the sense of bankruptcy, then you're going to be skewed towards that. So if you want to maximize your firm value, you would just maximize your debt. Okay, so and at the same thing, if you want to minimize your cost of capital, you would also maximize your debt because it's the cheaper source of financing, and you got rid of the only consequence or the major consequence of debt is the possibility that the company would go bankrupt. Okay, so maximizing debt is the solution to both Proposition 1 and 2. Case 3. This, this is the only realistic one. This is where taxes exist and where bankruptcy is also possible. So in this scenario, um, we have a situation that there is going to be an optimal debt to equity ratio that allows a firm to maximize the value of that firm. Okay, now unlike in case two where we had some formulas that we could use, there's no formulas for this case. It was just shown on that chart that eventually you keep adding debt until you hit your optimal level, and that's where you should operate. And that's a number that's going to be different for every company and every industry, and it's not something that can be numerically calculated. And the same thing for minimizing cost of capital. There's an optimal debt to equity ratio that allows a firm to minimize their capital. And the important thing to note is that this optimal debt to equity ratio is going to be the same for both. So the same optimal debt to equity ratio will allow the firm to maximize the value and minimize their cost of capital.